The story follows a pop star battling a deadly curse spreading through terrifying hallucinations and violence.
We need to kill you first.
What?
The story picks up 6 days after Smile 1, with Joe now cursed. The curse transferred to him, and he has only a day left to pass it on to save himself. Wearing his hood up, Joe confronts a guy heading home and warns him to keep quiet about their meeting. They go inside where another guy, a friend of the first and also a dealer, waits. Joe then tells the older guy to watch closely what he's about to do. Then Joe pulls out a knife and stabs the captive. But he does it incorrectly. When the other dealer threatens him, Joe stabs him again, this time with such power that the person appears to be dying. Joe, in a panic, starts shouting that he wants someone to remove the curse from him while attempting to stop the bleeding. But he fails and both men die. Joe accepts his fate, convinced that his time is over and that the curse will soon take him. But just then, another man, a dealer's buyer who had been quietly watching everything, walks into the light. This is Lewis. Horrified, Joe apologizes, stating he didn't know Lewis was there and that he doesn't deserve the curse. But it's too late. The curse has found its new host. After this tense moment, Joe leaves the house, but luck isn't on his side. The gang that the dealers belong to has arrived and is immediately pursuing him. Joe flees in desperation, but is struck by a vehicle in the process. And with that, Joe meets his sad end, delivering the curse to the lone witness, Lewis. Later, the news introduces us to the one and only Sky Riley. A well-known artist has just released the dates for her much-anticipated world tour. Sky won a Grammy last year and was about to embark on a tour, but she had to postpone due to an emotional breakdown. As she departs the interview, we find her mobbed by admirers who follow her every move on social media, constantly wanting more from their beloved celebrity. A few minutes later, Sky is rehearsing with her squad, but her tiredness is beginning to show. Despite her team's advice to rest owing to her acute back pain, Sky refuses to give up. Sky goes to the restroom to take the medicines she has been concealing. These aren't typical medications. There's something harsher that she's been taking to deal with the excruciating back pain that's afflicted her since a previous injury. As she looks at herself in the mirror, we see irregular scars on her abdomen, reminders of that tragic event. Just as she's about to take the forbidden pills, a knock on the door startles her, and she drops them. It's her mother, Elizabeth. Elizabeth tells her how proud she is, advises her to keep up the pace with practices, and then chooses to drive her home. Sky swiftly leaves home after saying her goodbyes to her mother. She gets in a cab and travels to her buddy Lewis's apartment, the same Lewis from before. Sky isn't just going to visit him. He's the one who buys her back pain medicines, and he had messaged her suggesting she could stop by his apartment. But when she comes and mentions the message, Lewis seems perplexed. Even though he doesn't remember sending it, he calms down when he sees it's Sky Riley at his door. He informs her that, indeed, he has everything she needs, but she must wait a minute before he leaves the room. Lewis reveals he's had a terrible week and has been seeing spirits everywhere, which makes Sky nervous. While Sky waits, she switches on the television to pass the time, only to be met with a news program on her life. The report details the vehicle collision she was involved in a year ago. Sky was with her then partner when the automobile crashed after leaving a party. Sky's partner died in the tragedy, and she has since suffered from agony and sadness. The images on the screen bring back those dark memories, making her more uncomfortable by the second. Suddenly, she decides it's time to leave. She shouts out to Lewis, urging him to return since she needs to relax for the next day. But suddenly Lewis stumbles in, obviously disoriented, shrieking that something or someone is after him. Before Sky can respond, he collapses on the floor, and she believes he's overdosed. Panicking, she contemplates asking for assistance, but something prevents her. Then Lewis slowly stands up, a twisted smirk on his face. He smiled at her without saying anything. He gets a weight disc and begins pounding his own face, all while maintaining that eerie smile. The horrific sounds of the hits echoed throughout the apartment, freezing Sky in horror. The image is so overpowering that, without completely understanding it, the curse transfers from Lewis to her. Terrified and in shock from what she's just witnessed, Sky decides not to call for help. Instead, her eyes fix on the substance Lewis had given her earlier. She walks home, still shaking, and tries to relax with a drink of water. She takes a bath to unwind, but as she washes her hair, she sees something troubling. Her hair falls out in clumps. She goes to bed, confused and terrified, expecting to sleep, but nothing happens. A weird sound interrupts the night stillness. After a few anxious seconds, it seems like nothing, yet the emotion persists. Sky arrives the next day to meet with her crew, who prepare her for the picture session. Her mother, Elizabeth, is there, promising her that she would always be at her side and that she will never be alone. She also asks about Gemma, an old friend Sky hasn't spoken to in over a year due to a falling out. Sky is deep in meditation after the talk. She decides to phone her old friend Gemma, despite the fact that she hasn't spoken with her in over a year. She informs Sky that her life is going well and admits she wasn't expecting to hear from her. Sky admits in a moment of weakness that she feels entirely alone and overwhelmed by everything going on, and asks Gemma to come visit her. Sensing the desperation in Sky's voice, Gemma agrees and promises to be there in 45 minutes. To pass the time and settle her nerves, Sky sits at the piano, letting the music soothe her. Abruptly, she gets distracted by a sound. She follows the sound down the corridor nervously, and she is transfixed by what she discovers. Shuddering, Sky continues to walk and finds Lewis's clothing strewn all over the floor. Suddenly, the lights go out. A dark entity emerges from the shadows and begins to approach her. Sky's heart pounding, she flees the house in a panic. Gemma comes right before she gets to the front door. She inquires as to what's happening, but Sky is still in shock and can hardly speak, saying that she hasn't slept and had a horrible lucid dream. With tears in her eyes, she apologizes again for their falling out and, in a desperate plea, begs Gemma never to leave her. Surprised by Sky's outburst, Gemma tries to calm her down. Still shaken, Sky confesses to Gemma what happened with Lewis. Because no doctor would prescribe anything stronger for her excruciating back pain, she explained, she went to him in search of heavier medicines. She spoke about Lewis's unusual behavior, as if he was afraid of something that only he could see, while crying. Abruptly, he reached for a metal weight and pounded himself till he was unrecognizable. Gemma is unable to comprehend what she is hearing and is in shock, but she is aware that Sky would not fabricate such a story. Seeing how upset her buddy is, she chooses to spend the night with her. Time appears to be slipping away, and Sky is confused, wondering how the night went by so fast. When she checks the time, it's much later than she thought, and she knows her mom, Elizabeth, will scold her for being late to rehearsal. Elizabeth arrives, pushing Sky out the door because her squad has already waited for her. Sky Riley comes at rehearsal, high with adrenaline, and insists on starting right away. Despite her frenzied energy, she appears enthusiastic and prepared for the show. However, while practice, she has a terrible ache in her leg and collapses on the floor, scared that something horrible has occurred. Her team rushes over, but following assessment, they discover nothing amiss. Her leg is completely okay. Confused and shaken, Sky tries to pull herself together, but the eerie feeling that something is very wrong lingers. Sky finds her dressing room in utter ruin after rehearsal. She blames her helper, Joshua, out of anger, claiming to have witnessed him leave the room. Her mother is adamant that Joshua couldn't have done it because he had been with her all day. Elizabeth, worried, asks Sky whether she has resumed taking illegal substances. Sky firmly denies. Sky receives further texts from the mysterious number while on her way there. This time, the messages are even more unsettling. They tell her that she is in terrible danger and needs assistance. To obtain it, they must meet in person. The text assures she is not hallucinating and that everything she has seen is true. To prove it, they send her a video. The video is horrific. It portrays Lewis 4 days before his death, pallid and afraid. The camera shakes as he holds it nervously, opening the door to his apartment. He walks cautiously, muttering that he feels like he's being watched and that everyone he sees is smiling at him in a creepy way. Then the video suddenly shows a smiling person next to Sky. She is horrified to see herself so near the figure in the video. Sky panics and decides she will encounter the sender of the texts. She answers right away, insisting on knowing the meeting location. When someone gives her a location, Sky immediately leaves. Morris, an elderly guy, greets her when she gets there. He clarifies that he attempted to alert Lewis before it was too late. He informs Sky that Lewis was not a suicide victim but rather was infected and under the control of a metaphysical entity that only infected people can perceive. Sky, who has previously witnessed it, is currently under its influence. The entity, Morris explains, is like a parasite that feeds on its host's fears, traumas, and dark emotions. Morris now offers Sky a strategy since he is committed to halting the parasite. A host who passes away without any witnesses can break the curse. He plans on temporarily killing Sky in order to get the parasite to leave her, then reviving her. He warns her that if they don't act soon, the entity will kill her, as she's already been infected for 3 days. Sky, however, doesn't fully trust Morris. She doesn't know him well, and the plan sounds terrible. As she considers her options, numerous people recognize her and approach her for autographs. Sky, overwhelmed, doesn't know what to do and flees the situation. She dashes back to her residence, where the agonizing back agony strikes her once more. Sky panics. Something frightening occurs when she attempts to leave her room to relax. Several people are standing in the corridor, all with weird smiles. Sky doesn't even have time to react before they start chasing her. They pursue her down the hall, cornering her, and violently slam her against the table. They hit her hard while wearing twisted, frightening smiles. At this point, the narrative shifts back to one of Sky's worst times. She is in the car with her ex-partner Paul, and she is high on painkillers. Paul, enraged, shouts at her, "I can't take it anymore." They shout insults at one another, their words piercing deep until, in a fit of fury, Sky grabs the steering wheel and forcefully swerves the car, triggering the accident that killed Paul and destroyed her world 2 years ago. Sky abruptly awakens in a hospital. She has a concussion from the attack, and her mother, Elizabeth, stands behind her, smiling coldly. Her mother informs her that she's already rearranged her schedule and that they have the day off before starting the world tour the next day. Sky, still traumatized and confused, responds that all her mother worries about is money. Hurt, Elizabeth tells her that she gave up everything for Sky. Tension rises between them, and a heated debate ensues. Sky, terrified, watches in terror as Elizabeth, in a rage, smashes a mirror and begins cutting herself in front of her daughter. Desperate, Sky tries to escape the chaos, but suddenly realizes she's holding the bloodied shard of glass. She drops it on the ground in horror. She quickly returns to make sure what had transpired is true, and it is. Her mother is covered in blood as she lies on the floor. Sky is paralyzed by the shock. In the confusion, she manages to escape and finds Gemma waiting outside, ready to help her flee. They drive for a time together, but Sky is overcome with shame and despair. She begs Gemma to leave her alone, stressing that she doesn't want to wreck her life the way she has everyone else's. However, Gemma rejects, assuring that they would always be together. Sky receives a phone call at that same time. The speaker on the other ring is Gemma, who informs her she hasn't come to her house in over a year, not since their heated argument when Sky branded her a leech. Sky, perplexed and afraid, looks over at Gemma, the driver next to her, who smiles sinisterly. "The true Gemma despises you," the apparition replies in a cold, nasty tone. Sky, panicked, reminds herself again, and over that she's in control. With all her strength, she focuses on that thought and suddenly realizes it was her all along who had been driving the car. Her thoughts racing, she resolves to visit Morris, who had given her a location where he may assist her overcome the curse. Inside, the entity attempts to seduce Sky into locking eyes with it. But Sky, determined not to give up, closes her eyes and fights to recover control. Desperate, she takes a syringe that Morris had left behind and injects it into her own jugular, trying to end it all. But the devil chuckles, informing her that the syringe isn't genuine and she'll never be able to escape. Sky, horrified, learns the needle was simply another delusion. The devil causes her to break her own leg before locking her inside a freezer. A few seconds later, the scene changes drastically. Sky Riley is now on stage, dressed in the outfit she had been wearing. The concert has begun, and her mother is in the audience, clapping proudly. But when Sky glances down, she sees another version of herself, the shattered, tortured version. This version grinned cruelly as the scar on her abdomen began to break apart, exposing a terrifying creature developing from within. The beast approaches Sky, pushing her to grin with brute force, twisting her face till it cracks. Suddenly, we are back at the performance. The audience waits expectantly as Sky falls on stage, on the edge of a breakdown. Her supporters encourage her to continue. But when Sky looks at them, she grins in a rather unnerving manner. Silence settles over the audience as Sky, plainly broken, chooses to end her life in front of everyone. With her final breath, the curse that had consumed her transfers to every person in the crowd, or so it seems. And that's how Smile 2 ends. The curse, far from being over, continues to spread, claiming new victims until next time.